Welcome to Divorce and Other Things You Can Handle, a branded podcast by Worthy. I'm Jennifer Butler, and I'm your host. Have you ever looked back and wondered how you ever ended up in the type of relationship you were in? Ever wondered how the heck the relationship could have gotten as bad as it did? Or questioned your own patterns and wondered how you keep ending up in the same situation with the same type of person over and over again? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, you're not alone, and you're definitely going to want to tune into this episode. Carey Davidson is back for her third episode in our 4-part series, talking to us about the 5 personality types, and today we'll specifically focus on how understanding them can help you to avoid repeating patterns. How amazing would it be to never have to look back again and wonder, what was I thinking? If you haven't listened to the previous episodes with Carey, I highly recommend going back and listening in. For now, though, we're going to take a short break and be back talking with Carey Davidson. When you sell a piece of jewelry, you can't control how much it's worth, but you can make sure that you're selling smart with a team of experts and advocates behind you at Worthy. Your engagement ring can be a financial asset that allows you to embrace a new and fulfilling life after divorce. Let us help you get the best deal possible for the jewelry you've outgrown. Go to worthy.com/podcast to learn more. Many of you know Carey Davidson very well by now, but for those of you who don't, Carey is the founder and CEO of Tournesol, the holistic health think tank collaborative in New York City, which combines frontier science and proven wisdom, empowering people and organizations. Welcome back, Carey. This is our third episode in our 4-part series. And as you know, I think as everyone knows now, I'm always happy to have the time to get into conversation with you and bring your wisdom to our listeners. So welcome.
Oh, thank you, Jen. I love doing this with you, so I appreciate it.
I was just thinking too, because you and I spent some time talking offline, and I'm like, maybe we should record these too, because I think we end up with some really great conversations.
I know, right?
So last time you were on, well, let's go over the last couple of times. So we've been talking about the 5 personality archetypes, and the first time we really got into what each was and the individual characteristics for each. Last episode, we started talking about how those archetypes come in how we relate to one another in our relationships. And this week, we're going to continue on that relational patterns, but we're really going to talk about how people can start applying this to their lives so they don't have to keep ending up in these relationships where they are like, oh my gosh, I did it again. How did I end up here?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, why again? So I guess let's just start, for anyone who hasn't listened to those episodes, they can kind of tune in and go back. But as you're speaking today, I guess just include some of those facts about each type for anyone who's kind of just jumping in fresh here, so that they are, they have some knowledge around what each archetype is.
Okay, you got it.
I guess let's just start with, the unique characteristics that we should really be aware of as we discuss this topic.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's funny when you talk about going around and making the same mistakes over and over again. We'll discuss a little bit about fire's tendency to do that. But I remember post-divorce, I specifically went to a therapist to talk about, how do I make sure I don't do this again? Is it me? Is it the guy? What is this? I don't want to get into these patterns. So I love that we're talking about this today. And I hope that it really gives people some kind of skills and tools and red flags, kind of things to pay attention to that'll keep them out of those cycles. And we all have our ways, which you'll hear about in a minute. But so these 5 types: fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. Fiery people, they are playful, and earthy people love harmony and relationships and togetherness, and metal likes rhythm and consistency to their relationships, and water likes deep meaning and pausing and immersion, and wood likes to explore. They like adventure. They like decision making. Let's do this. So we all come to relationships with this very particular way of seeing the world, of seeing problem solving, of believing what's important, and even, how and why we get stressed out. So specifically, some of these characteristics as far as like what to look for, right, in these relationship patterns are, things specifically for fire revolve around kind of not wanting to fix anything, right? Because it gets too hard and it's not fun.
Right.
Fire wants fun in their relationship. So when, the one way that you can start to notice a fiery person is when they just kind of, they're great and they show up when it's fun. And when the going gets tough, they're like, yeah, I have a party to go to instead.
Right. We all have those types of people in our lives.
Yeah. And then we have, earth people. Earth people, they avoid conflict. Earth people don't feel comfortable. Also, when the going gets tough, they don't disappear. They don't want you to disappear, but they over please you, so you don't feel conflicted or you don't feel upset with them. Mm-hmm. They just want to smooth it over. Everything should just be easy. Metal people can sometimes get stuck on what you did to them. And so they get stuck in the past and in the story and have a hard time moving through and seeing the potential for tomorrow. Well, tomorrow, we'll probably be over this and we'll have a good day. But instead, the conversation and a conflict revolves around what you did to me.
Right.
And water people you can notice by kind of they disappear in a conflict, but they don't, we talked about this last week. It's like they go into their heads, they philosophize and they think about it. They don't see the benefit in talking to you about it always. It's just safer in their mind. Wood people they react quickly and very loudly. So they might sometimes get too angry to even notice what the other person needs or to stop and listen for a second. They just plow through. It's like bull in a china shop.
Right.
It's over and they're ready to move on. And everyone else is sitting there going, oh, what just happened?
Right. So these are like the default, almost like the sort of without thinking, the unconscious way that these different types would sort of just react or engage in any sort of conflict.
Yeah. So these are examples of the 5 types in stress.
Okay.
Right. So imagine you're in a relationship and there's a conflict or a disagreement. If you're feeling your best and you got good sleep and you've had good food and your digestion's working and you're exercising and you're self-aware and a conflict arises, you're probably better able to manage it without reacting. However, these are the reactive states.
Got it.
You can most identify the 5 types in their most intensely strong states, like what they bring to the party that's good, and in their most intense stress states, like how they get when they're at their wits' end.
Right.
So those examples are like kind of, you're pushing my buttons, I don't feel safe right now, and I'm going to react.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, because like the complaints we'll hear or what we'll read in our Facebook group are things like, jealousy or over controlling or over protectiveness or, things like that, like those more sort of everyday language type complaints, is like a specific type more likely to be the jealous type or the, controlling type or that kind of thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Had a feeling you would say that.
Right? Yeah. So again, these are our traits under stress, right? So the same person who has the tendency to be more controlling or jealous, that just comes out when they don't feel secure or safe.
Right.
Or their needs are not taken care of. Their physical needs for like physical health, their cognitive needs for listening and growing and learning, and their spiritual needs. So when we don't feel safe and our needs aren't met, then these qualities come out. each of the five has their fear that leads them to these behaviors. So fire's biggest fear is losing love, right? So fire loves attention. Fire loves you to look at them.
Right.
Fire is an entertainer, and they crave and thrive on your attention pretty much. And so their biggest fear is this loss of love. So, somebody might say about a fire person that they're too flirty. They flirt with everybody. When in fact, what's going on in a fire person's mind is more around loving life and sharing that zest with everyone who comes in their path.
Right.
And just by the sparkle in their eye or the smile to brighten your day. But to other people in the room, it can come across as, well, she's just flirting with every single guy. She's here on a date with me.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so that's fire. Earth's biggest fear is abandonment, right? So Earth can kind of get overstuck in taking care of everybody's needs. And they can't make a decision, and they could get to the point where they get stuck at home, right? They don't even want to go out. They don't want to engage. They are lovely teachers and caregivers. But, in overwhelm, when they're afraid of abandonment, they hold on too long. These are the ones that they just won't stop talking. Right? Give me some space. I feel suffocated by this person, right? So they can overdo it. So that's kind of the complaint of the people around an earth person, is that they're just too overbearing. Like it's not fun anymore. It's just like, they just want to talk all the time, and they're so needy. So then you have metal. Metal people, their biggest fear in the world is making a mistake or being wrong. And so they tend to be overcritical and over-judgmental when they're in their stress states.
Okay.
So they're kind of the opposite of fire. They're the Debbie Downer when they're not feeling great, right? So they have a tendency to dampen the fun.
Okay.
Because, fire wants fun, and fire doesn't want any rules, and metal is the keeper of the rules.
Right.
Right? So under stress, right, the other ones might envision, or they might criticize metal people for being too critical or too much of a stickler for the rules. Like on a date, a metal person would get really mad and probably not see you again if you were late. So they're about the rules and being on time, and there's just standards for how you behave on a date, and who drives the furthest, and there's all these rules, right?
Yeah.
So they can kind of be criticized for being too rigid. Then you have water. Water's biggest fear, around in relationships can lean towards not being understood. Their gift to the world is understanding everything and being wise and knowing everything. But it happens because of this vast imagination and capacity in their minds to understand, right? So that same vastness can lead to feeling alone and isolating too much, and wondering if anyone even understands you at all. So those other types of would maybe see a stressed out water person as someone who ignores you, someone who doesn't care, someone who's snobby, like too cool to talk to me.
Yeah.
Who too cool to show up at the party. But really what's going on inside a water person is they don't really feel comfortable in social situations. They like one-on-one. They like to really have these deep conversations with you at home.
Right.
But they can come off as like the people, what is it called? Ghosting these days.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. They're not talking to me. Well, they're retreating because they feel too much. They feel like you're too much. You want to talk too much.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. So then wood. So wood is, their biggest fear is confinement. So imagine what that's like in a relationship.
Right.
It's hard because like, dude, I need my space if I'm a wood person. And sometimes when they are stressed out, it's like my way or the highway. And they have a hard time compromising or collaborating or cooperating. They're the opposite of Earth, who just wants unity and community and can be overbearing in that way.
Right.
But yeah, wood people, I work with a lot of wood people who like long distance relationships, and that's the only type of relationship they like. And it makes sense because they've got a lot of space. They can control how much time they spend seeing each other. But yeah, these people can be pushy and argumentative when they're not feeling their best. And that can be hard in a relationship when someone else in the relationship wants to compromise or wants to solve problems and have everyone's opinions be heard.
Absolutely. This is so interesting. I mean, it's so interesting to see, the biggest fear, because I do think that we each uniquely have, our kind of worst case scenario, right? That thing we go to, the worst thing that could absolutely happen, or, oh my gosh, if I do this, I'm going to die type fear.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see like how unique each one is to each personality type.
Very much. And sometimes they're conflicting.
Right.
Right. So like you as an earth person, you want togetherness, and a wood person wants to be alone. And so if you were in a relationship, it can be a challenge.
Right. Absolutely. The nagging, the common complaint of the person who's nagging and the person who's withdrawing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So interesting. Okay. So I think let's take a break here. And then when we come back, let's kind of dive in, still looking at these patterns, but looking at them in this way of recognizing them and that goal of avoiding them.
You got it.
When I decided to sell my jewelry after my divorce, the most important thing to me was finding a company that I could trust and one that would also advocate for me. I found this and so much more at Worthy. Their expert staff immediately put me at ease and helped me to get the best price possible for my jewelry. Your engagement ring can be a symbol of your freedom, your journey, and the choices you have made to live your life on your terms and create the future you desire. Let us help you get the best deal possible for the jewelry you've outgrown. Go to worthy.com/podcast to learn more. We are back talking with Carey Davidson, and we are discussing the 5 personality archetypes and how to apply those in your life so that you can recognize patterns and never have to look back and say, oh my gosh, how did I end up here again? So we were chatting about really, each type, their biggest fear and how that shows up, how they show up when they're feeling stressed and that fear has really been triggered. And so now let's start chatting about, the recognition of these patterns so that we can start learning how to avoid repeating the same thing over and over.
Mm-hmm. So as I've mentioned, conflict comes up when we are not having our needs met, when we don't feel safe, when we don't feel good. And it's important to recognize that about yourself and do some self-care and self-evaluation, make sure that you're strong.
Right. And I wanted to say that too. I think that as we're talking about this, it's important for us to just kind of highlight, you can meet your own needs and make sure that you're being taken care of. It's not necessarily the relationship where you're going to get your needs met.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. We get into some trouble in that space.
Yeah.
I'm kind of guilty of that in the past.
I'm sure we all are. We all are.
So understanding these patterns so that we can avoid them in these conflicting states and in these challenging states for us, fire just gives up. Earth blames themselves. What did I do wrong? Right? Because I'm such a caregiver. How could anyone want to leave?
Mm-hmm.
And, metal gets stuck on the past and stuck on their stories and stuck on, being wrong. Who's wrong? Water fears the future. Water's like, no one ever understands me. How am I ever going to have a successful relationship? And wood just wants to plow through. Wood gets kind of angry and can say, you know what?
Right. Bye-bye.
Right. So in those states, no one can really solve problems, right?
Right.
And in order to avoid repeating our stuff, it's important to understand that in these relationships, there's two people, right? And in order to move through and have this model work for you, this model assumes two healthy people who want to grow.
Right.
And that means two healthy people who are not coming in thinking, well, someone's going to win and someone's going to lose, and someone's right and someone's wrong. So the mindset has to be, wow, this conflict kind of feels like crap. I love this other person, or I care about this other person. How can we look at it and both grow and both learn something?
Absolutely.
That's when it works the best, because there's definitely a fine line between empathizing with yours and your partner's needs and martyrdom, right? I'm not suggesting that we totally give up everything we need to take care of and recognize the other person's needs and their conflict states. So definitely, sometimes we need outside help.
Mm-hmm.
But there's three key skills for building this emotional resilience so you don't get into these patterns. And it starts with self-awareness. And from the 5 elements methodology, it's, which is my primary type. And it's easy to become self-aware and self-conscious when you understand your strength states and your stress states.
Right.
And then self-regulate. Sometimes it's in the moment. Sometimes it's take a breath, listen to yourself, take a walk. Nothing's an emergency unless it's really an emergency, and then go to the hospital.
Right.
We're not in the best headspace to avoid our patterns, right? If we are just in our reactionary modes. So take the time, like you said, take care of yourself and for the long haul so that you build a foundation of resilience to these stress triggers. But also, in the moment, you don't need to react. And then build empathy. So understand who is your partner of these 5 types. Learn how to recognize their stress states and be able to stop in the moment and say, oh, my wood partner's expressing anger right now.
Mm-hmm.
He's not feeling safe, or she's not feeling safe. It's not the time to try to solve this major problem.
Yeah. And so as you're speaking, some of these, so self-awareness, self-regulation, and empathy, these are skills that maybe some of our listeners just haven't learned yet. I feel like, self-regulation is something, it's like a life skill that not everybody learned. And that's okay. I think it's just kind of the willingness to say, okay, I'm not very good at this, or I don't really even know how to do this, but I can learn.
Exactly. I mean, it took me a long time and I'm still working on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to be a victim.
Right.
Than it is to take some level of responsibility for moving things forward in a different direction. It's really hard.
Absolutely. And I think the first time I heard the term self-regulation, I don't even think I really understood what that meant, and that it was even something I was supposed to be doing, right? And so these simple concepts that just seem like, oh, of course, I shouldn't react. I should be regulating myself. They can be foreign, and they can just be something, like I said, that you just need to learn.
It is. I mean, it's not part of our formal education. It's not part of health education. We learn very little about mental health,
mm-hmm.
right? And so we get thrown into the most important parts of our lives, which are our relationships, our love relationships and our work relationships. And we just sit there and a lot of times suffer.
Right.
In confusion and wondering, am I doing something wrong? We're like, what is going on?
Right.
And then we just, marriages dissolve and work situations start to stink, and we don't learn how to self-reflect and then balance our own selves.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a skill, and it's a super important one.
Yeah. Okay. So I totally took you sidetracked. So let me bring you back. I don't know if you were finished with talking about the emotional resilience piece.
Yeah, I think it's an important point, as we go through these 5 types and their patterns and how we get into our problem areas. It's important to recognize how much control this gives us over how we feel and how we move through our conflicts.
So let's kind of talk about red flags, right? Because I feel like this is kind of a buzz term, as it should be. I think that a lot of times we will kind of go throughout our day, we're dating, we're getting into relationships, we're kind of seeing what we want to see, we're missing those quote unquote red flags. So how does this sort of these patterns and seeing these patterns in this way correlate with us being able to spot red flags?
So these red flags are things that you can work on recognizing in yourself, depending on which is your primary of the 5 types. But also, you should know all 5 of them so that you can start to recognize them in the people you're dating, or a person you're married to, or other people in your life, so that you can start also recognizing when the other people in your life are in these states of overwhelm. And then you can make decisions from that, knowing, okay, Molly is not feeling great now. It's not time for her to make this big decision or be creative or solve a problem or fall in love. So here are the 5 kind of red flags. Each of the 5 can kind of get addicted to a behavior when they're not balanced. And they can find meaning only in this one thing. And when that happens, it's a pretty, strong red flag, or a viewpoint into being able to see that they're not able to find meaning in things that maybe you might find meaning in. And it's harder for them to balance out their ability to be in a relationship and to be strong.
Okay.
So fire people get addicted to pleasure. So if fire only finds pleasure in pleasure, right? Then they're constantly needing excitement in their lives. They don't see the value in quieting down.
Uh-huh.
They don't see the value in exploring deep meaning with you or sitting down and having a quiet lunch. It's not fun. And they can more easily burn out, because when you stop providing pleasure, when it's not fun anymore, they're out.
Right.
So that's a red flag when your partner is a fire person, or when you're the fire person and you're really only being driven by this massive sense of excitement and pleasure. Just take a step back, and kind of see if you can balance that out, because it's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So then we have earth. Earth people become addicted to being in relationships. Right. So if an earth person becomes so stuck on taking care of someone else in a relationship that they start to avoid taking care of themselves, that's a red flag, because eventually they'll either get sick, or they'll get sick of you.
Right.
So again, it's not the most sustainable situation, but you should take a look. Like, are you dating an earth person who's constantly cooking for you and bringing over food and constantly making your life easier and going out of their way to help you? And meanwhile, you see like he or she is starting to look disheveled.
Right.
Make sure that they're taking care of themselves too, because that's a more sustainable relationship.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So a metal person becomes addicted to being right. So they kind of become addicted to the rules. So they almost become like, it's the forest for the trees. They get so focused on the detail of every limb on every tree, that they lose sight of the bigger picture, that they hold the relationship back from any kind of growth or adventure or bigger opportunity or just plain fun.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have someone, if you're either a metal person or you're dating a metal person who's really rigidly, focused on expectations and timing and details and values. I mean, certainly values are important, but like over focused, and you feel like it's holding the relationship back, that's a red flag. It's something to look at. It's something to see, well, what is my metal partner or me as a metal person? What am I not getting that I need, that I feel the need to over control?
Right. Okay.
So water people, when water people think too much, they can get addicted to thinking, actually. They love being in their mind. They love their fantasy worlds. And sometimes they can get so stuck in their minds that they don't come out and see the benefit of sharing their brilliant ideas with you. They don't want to come out and have dinner. They don't really want to connect. They love quiet time, but too much quiet time. And so when you notice your water partner is just spending too much time alone or doesn't want to talk when you're around, just likes you just sitting there too much, that's an opportunity to say, hey, like, what else is going on here? Are you feeling, is there something you're not getting? Is there something you need in this relationship? And if, at the same time, if you're the water person and you're not engaging, what's going on for you? It's an opportunity to take a look inside.
Right.
So wood people can get addicted to winning. And so that can be, in relationships, it could be the excitement of, what is it called? The excitement of the chase.
Yeah.
So it can be like, I just wanted to win, and now I'm going to go win something else.
Right.
And also it could be in a relationship needing to win every argument.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or needing to win the decision for where we go all the time. It's someone who's too over the top about needing to win. That's also kind of a red flag that, what's not being met in this person's life? What do they need? What's missing? So those are kind of the 5 red flags for each.
What I love about the way you're discussing the red flags in this paradigm is it's relational.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when you think about red flags, it's very like, oh, well, he didn't pull the chair out for me, or, oh, well, she, I don't know, didn't stop talking, whatever. It's like, you know what I mean? They're very like, there's something wrong with that person. Whereas you are discussing red flags in this really in dynamics between two people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what they are. I love that you used dynamics, because these are so dynamic. They are always changing in context. And we're never fixed into a spot where we can't grow, or we can't learn. This is a model for seeing yourself as an unfolding story constantly. And this is kind of this, this really cool guide that you can always plug yourself into and your certain situation into, and kind of say, oh, this is my perspective and this is his perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And we are close to our stress states, or we're really far in our strength states, and that's why it's working.
Right.
In those moments, you really don't get so caught up on the fixed details of whether or not he pulled out your chair. Instead, you understand that he's a fire person. He is so caught up in how damn gorgeous that dress is on you and how amazing your eyes look tonight that he can't think of anything else.
Right.
So yeah, it's always changing, always dynamic, and always a very positive way to see the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And just how much we really influence one another depending on where we're centered in our strength or our stress.
Exactly. Because you could just be being your best self in your mind, and your best self is naturally uncomfortable for another type or two.
So powerful. I love that. Okay, so any archetype combinations that absolutely should be avoided?
Right. Oh, goodness. Well, so our challenging types are also our teachers.
Right.
So if you're feeling, non-reactive and you're feeling strong and you're choosing to reflect and learn from conflict, you're going to flourish with any of your challengers or any of your nurturing types. Right. And the funny thing is that we actually do crave our challengers.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like as a fire person, I really need to be alone sometimes, right? I need water activities or I'm going to burn out. And I need structure, which is metal, or else I am just all over the place with no direction, right? But if we're not putting the work in, and that goes for like both parties in a couple, if people are not doing the, being self-reflective, self-aware, and doing the self-balancing behaviors, it's going to be really hard for us to be in those challenging relationships. And those are fire with metal or water, right? Because naturally in their stress states, fire people get too bubbly and too silly and too excitable and too dramatic.
Right.
Metal people become too rigid, right? And water people become, too invisible. So those combinations in stress they probably won't even see each other in a room. They're just so polar opposites. So earth has that with water and wood.
Mm-hmm.
And metal has that with wood and fire. Water has it with earth and fire. And wood has it with earth and metal.
Okay.
Those are the button pusher relationships that, in a really strong state where you feel good about yourself and you believe in who you are and you know how to self-regulate and recognize when you're going into stress, those types actually help you. They really help you grow. And a lot of times, some of the most wonderful lasting relationships are between those two challengers, but you both have to be ready with your, the hats on that are all about like, I'm in this to work together, and it's not in it to win it. It's in it to grow together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like that across the board for any successful and healthy relationship really is being in it to grow and learn and discover one another.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it can be so rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. So awesome. Okay, so is there anything we missed or anything else you want to share before we say goodbye for today?
Just driving home the idea that the one person you can control is you. And the more self-conscious you can be in the moment and recognize when you're going into your stress states without judging yourself. It's not about judging.
Right.
It's all about a process and a journey, to growing constantly. And the more you can be in that space, the better partner you're going to be to anyone. And the more quickly you're going to call someone on their,
Yep.
And you won't let that stuff into your life anymore.
So powerful. Thank you so much again. How can our listeners follow up with you?
So you can find me on my website, www.tournesolwellness.com, TOURNESOL wellness.com.
Perfect. Thank you again for being here with us. I am looking forward to having you back for our last episode.
Thanks, Jen.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Make sure you subscribe so you can catch every new episode of Divorce and Other Things You Can Handle in your weekly feed. If you like what you hear, rate and review us to help other women like you find us. This podcast is for you, so email us at podcast@worthy.com with any questions or ideas that you may have. We look forward to hearing from you.